Alright, so time is important. So is having someone in my corner. That doesn't mean somebody willing to argue on Facebook. That means someone willing to look at what I'm going through, actually look at the evidence. And as much as I would love to put it all on the internet, I've been trying. I collected as much evidence as I could. As soon as I learned how to take screenshots with my telephone, I started taking screenshots. But it's not just about taking screenshots, it's about being able to show it, all of it, in its entirety, and in order, which Facebook doesn't allow. I've posted up the screenshots, quite a few of them on Facebook, but they're not in order. So they have to be gone through so that they can be put in order, so that people can understand the timeline. The other thing is the amount of times that I have lost the evidence or had it stolen. Now, in Virginia, it would have taken 5 minutes to show Natalie what was going on. 5 minutes. And she wanted to spend time with me as much as I wanted to spend time with her. If not more so, because like I said, I went on that trip to go see Natalie for a specific purpose. To stop her from fucking killing herself. At her request. But she's not the only one I went there to see. Mahalia Jean-Pierre, I'm going to have to put her stuff up there too. She's a part of this story. Now, after Virginia, while I was still in Virginia, Maddie Boa being a fucking bitch, that didn't need to happen. It wasn't my fault that Natalie was as fucked up as she was. It wasn't my fault that that phone was fucked up. And it wasn't my fault that I was being victimized for being the good guy. Just like with Miss Jamie, which I'm used to. Jamie, yeah, she's a pretty fucked up person, and I don't know what got her that way, but I do know that it wasn't my fault or my decision. When I went to Miss Peach's house, the first time I went to her house, it probably would have taken an hour of her time to look at everything that was going on and get her to go in with me to talk to the police. But she just didn't have time. Video games were important. Spending time with her family was important, and it should be. The second time that I went to her house to get that help, the same thing happened. But you know what? It probably would have taken about an hour and a half by that point to show everything that was going on. The third time that I went to her house, it probably would have taken 2 hours to show what was going on. The fourth time that I went to Miss Peach's house for help was when I found out that Natalie had disappeared. And by that point, it probably would have taken 3 or 4 hours to show what was going on. But nobody cared. Nobody cared. Joanna Taylor Smith pretended she was going to help, but she just never followed through. Everything was in texting, and I tell everybody, stop texting me. Call me and fucking listen. Don't call to talk over me. Your assumptions don't fucking matter if you weren't there. You need to listen to someone that was, and I was there. And don't just listen to me. Take a look at the evidence. I mean, so many people said, oh no, Sean, I don't have to see it. I believe you. Really. Because all of you fucking turned a blind eye and played victim and pretend like I'm the bad guy. You wouldn't be able to do that if you had taken a look at the evidence. If instead of believing me, you had actually taken a look for yourself, Derek Parrish. The fact is, the longer this goes on, the more there is to show. When I went to Tabitha Michelle Cook's house, Well, actually, when I went to Candace Bondurant's house, by the time I got to her house, it probably would have taken probably a good 15 hours to show everything that was going on. By the time that I left Candace's house, it probably would have taken 20 hours to show everything that was going on. By the time I was at Clearview, it probably would have taken 25 hours to show what was going on. By the time I got back here to Nebraska to try to get Sheriff Scott DaCosta to do his fucking job again, it probably would have taken 30 hours to show everything, well, more than that, probably 35 hours to show everything that was going on. Across multiple jurisdictions, multiple states, and I still had to collect all of that evidence. Now, my computer that I had, it broke, and Jen Beebe can verify this story. She works with Region 1 Nebraska. You can look them up on the internet. Jen Beebe and Nicole Peralta of Corunna Counseling in Sidney, Nebraska can verify that while Desiree was staying at my house, or at my apartment, that didn't have any internet access, that my computer broke, and that when I got my computer back, all of the evidence that I had collected was gone. That hard drive was fucking fried. So I had to start over on collecting that evidence. Meanwhile, I'm going through all of this abuse and all of this bullshit. The police not willing to do their job because nobody would go in with me. They kept saying that they would, but not following through. And then when I'm frustrated, they treat me like I am a piece of shit for being frustrated. If I'm typing curse words at you, I'm fucking frustrated, and I'm typing those curse words because when I was nice about it, you blew me off and blew me off and blew me off. You gave me empty promises but didn't keep your word. By the time Bobby got involved, it was already across several more states, more jurisdictions. Police had stolen the evidence repeatedly and refused to take a look at it. Every time that I got locked up in a hospital, I didn't need to be locked up in a hospital. I needed an officer to take a look at what the fuck was going on. We're not talking about civil stuff here. We are talking about criminal acts committed by the Bollinger family and by police officers in multiple jurisdictions. Meanwhile, they can slander my name across these jurisdictions. They can prevent me from going to court across multiple jurisdictions. They can transfer me out of jurisdiction so that I can't make a report. And they can assault the fuck out of me whenever the fuck they want. You're goddamn right I'm still speaking out. The evidence that I have to show, I'm lucky that I can even speak. The amount of time that it takes for me to download a video of this stuff to send up on the internet, it takes a lot of time. It would be lovely if I had a web page that could just hold all of this information. It would be lovely if I didn't have to go back and recollect the information all over again. And much of that information, like the stuff that was on my phones, it's not anywhere else in the world except on these other people's phones. These people who aren't willing to put that evidence forward. And I've been an asshole to all of them, every one of them. If they do show any evidence, it'll only be the way that I reacted to the abuse. Reacted to them lying to me, to wasting my time and wasting my resources. And then there's the fact that in order to do these things, I have to be able to make phone calls to all of these professionals during normal business hours. And everywhere that I went, or nearly everywhere that I went, there were rules that prevented me from doing this, like at Shannon Alvarado's. Not because of anything that I was doing, but because she was afraid people would get the wrong idea about her screaming at her daughter. I get that. Her daughter freaks out when Shannon is screaming. So if Shannon screams less, her daughter doesn't come out of her room at nighttime to fucking be pissed off. Shannon screams and screams and screams, and her daughter wakes up, and then they have blackout. That's where they turn off all the lights and pretend like they're all sleeping. And hopefully her daughter goes back in the room, and that's the whole point. And then once her daughter is back in the room and they think that she's sleeping again, Shannon goes right back to the screaming. So I'm up all night listening to screaming no matter what. I have things I need to do during the day. Meanwhile, I can't do those things during the day because she has those rules. I needed someone to sit down and look at this information with me. Someone to be informed so that I'm not walking in there with someone who's completely ignorant of the situation, like Steve Tombleson. And he's not a bad person. He is a great and wonderful person. But he didn't have the time to go through all of the stuff that I needed. It was basically a crash course, what I could tell him in the amount of time that we were in the vehicle on the way to go to my court date. Meanwhile, there's people like Graham who just couldn't make the time, and he was paid for his time. Before Natalie was killed, I offered $20 an hour to get someone to help me so that I could get the abuse to stop. People just wanted to be pieces of shit. Candace Bondurant should have come forward, and the fact is, her not coming forward is a fucking felony. I do mean that. The things that she did and the way that she misled me and chose to intentionally mislead the public. Having to deal with people like Karamia and Kara Johnson and Misty, a.k.a. Layla Johnson, a.k.a. Layla Dunan. These are not people that I should have had to deal with. I should have been able to go to the police. I should have had a caseworker who could go in with me to speak to the police, but they never did. They never did their jobs. And I have to understand why they couldn't do their jobs. I have to understand all of these people's excuses, but the fact is they are all excuses. The abuse that I endured because people who knew what was going on did not come forward with the truth. And nobody knew everything that was going on because nobody cared enough to listen to me before Natalie was dead. And afterwards, it was just an incredible amount of abuse, non-fucking stop to this very day. Taking away a disabled person's money and then abusing them for their disabilities. Taking advantage of their disabilities to prevent them from having an honest day in court. That's a fucked up thing to do. Nobody should have to break the law in order to defend themselves, but because of the term mentally ill, that is literally what I had to do. Either get someone to keep their word to go in with me, or break the law and hope that I can force that evidence to be seen. I need to be protected from law enforcement so that I can make these reports. That is the point of having someone go in with me. Meanwhile, the only person, literally the only person to go in with me to try to make the police take a report, the only person is Molly Smith. And Molly Smith doesn't have a lot of time. And I have to worry about the abuse that I will endure, even going in with her at this point, because they will trump something up. Fuck the police. The crimes that I committed here in Chapel, Nebraska, they dropped those charges. They should not have. The reason that I broke those laws was to force the police to look at that evidence. and to force an outside agency to look at the things that Officer Cody Selhorst was doing. Force them to look at the things that Sheriff Scott DaCosta was doing. Force them to take a look at what Officer Jordan Anderson had done repeatedly. See, it's easy to accuse somebody, but when they have proof, and nobody will look at that proof, and that person doesn't have the ability to show it, doesn't have the time, you have no idea how much time I have spent recording evidence